Okay,
And I record here.
got it. Recording my end as well. Zoom.
Okay.
Just get my.
Good.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Good.
We are recording. Adam, how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you, Stu. How are you?
I'm not too bad. I'm not too bad. I mean, before we do anything, that doesn't look like a camper van you're in today.
It is not a camper van. So, yeah, normally we are full time. I'm full time living in a camper van, but we're taking a bit of a break over winter, sheltering from the cold. And we're actually, yeah, we're going to go backpacking. We wanted to travel somewhere a bit more tropical. So, we're in the middle of transitioning out of the camper van and into, backpacking life for a while. We're always going to be doing van life, and we've lived in our van for the last 3.5 years full time,
Yeah.
and it's just nice to be in a building for a little bit. I love van life, but you can never appreciate how nice it is to have a flushing toilet and to have a tap and plumbing until until you've moved into a van and you come back to a house and you have it. You're like, wow.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, for those that haven't kind of stumbled across what you do on YouTube and as a podcast as well, could you sort of give
Mm-hmm.
the listeners a little bit of an insight into what you do? Because that's essentially how I kind of happen to have this conversation with you today, because
Yeah.
I'm very excited by van life, and I stumbled across a YouTube channel hosted by yourself and Tanya, I'll be speaking to after, and it blew my mind. And so if you could sort of give us a little bit of an insight as to what Jits into the sunset means as well.
Yes. So we moved into a camper van together 3.5 years ago now, about, yeah, a few months, like it's the September before the pandemic, September 2019. And we've been traveling around ever since, making films and putting them out on YouTube. We quit our jobs. We met in London, myself and Tanya, my girlfriend who travels with me. And we've just been on the road ever since. It's been wild. Like we quit and we initially thought, oh yeah, we'll just go traveling for a year and then we'll come back and resume life kind of thing. But the more we were in a van, the more we realized, oh, this is great. Like the sacrifices that you need to make to live in a van aren't as bad as I thought, and how much fun it is, and the amazing payoffs you get from living in a van are just more amazing than I thought. So we both agreed, like, let's just keep going. And from our YouTube, that picked up a little bit of steam. We got a bit of a community. We started building a community, and that ended up pretty much being able to. We're just at the point now where that is kind of funding our travels, so we didn't need to go back to work, and we just kind of accidentally became YouTubers. We always were going to make films doing it and put them on YouTube because my background is filmmaking, so that was something we were always going to do. But it just, yeah, developed into a new career path. Really strange. I still find it strange saying, oh, I'm a YouTuber if someone asks what I'm doing, because for so long I've said, oh, I'm a cameraman and an editor, because that's what my background is. So yeah, that was it. And then about it was summer of last year, we started our podcast, because there's not much travel adventure, like van life podcasts out there. And it's a kind of a similar format to this podcast, actually, in the fact that we just chat to people within a specific niche. Of course, yours is mostly musicians. Ours is mostly people who have done some kind of full-time travel. And yeah, we'd been wanting to start it for so long, and we kept putting it off because we were like, we're not good enough. And then we recorded one, listened, like about 2 years ago. We listened to it, and we're like, no, okay, we're not going to do this. It's not good enough. And then a year later, we came back to it, revisited, and we're like, we should do this. Played it out, and we're like, oh, we'd say exactly the same now if we were to redo it. So let's just put this one out. And then that was it. And since then, that was last summer, and we've been posting one every week, and it's the most consistent we've been on anything, because anyone who follows us on YouTube will know that we don't post every week. We post the films that we want to post, and it's much less frequent.
Well,
I'll
pick right up on that kind of the journey through filmmaking and the initial kind of travels and such, and what you do. But let's kick off the playlist. And you've been super greedy on all of the questions, and it's all right. I'll let you have honourable mentions, but you give me a couple for a few of the questions. Maybe you can only
because I
give me
haven't
one.
decided.
But you can get the honourable mention out of the way first. But for track one, I always ask guests, what's the song with the greatest ever intro?
Okay, so the reason that I found it so difficult is because it's like my mind just goes blank. It's like when you get asked, "Oh, what's your favorite film?" Suddenly you can't remember any films you've ever seen.
Yeah,
So I was like, "Oh my god!" So I spent so long thinking about this, and then and then I ended up writing down a list of loads and whittled them down. Um, so the honorable mention would be "Can't Stop" Red Hot Chili Peppers. That's just because
okay.
it's cool. So there's
Yeah,
no real story behind that one.
yeah.
But the one I've chosen is Deeper Underground by Jamiroquai. And I just love it. And it's just the drop when it goes from the kind of instrumental classical into the beat, I just love. And it's kind of the story for it as well as to why I remember it, because I was walking up through the village I grew in, listening to it on my way to, I think, to get cream soda or some like horrible drink when I was like a kid. And I'd been watching the Rocky films with my friend, and I really wanted to make a film like the Rocky film. And listening to this song, I could visualize like a fight sequence in my head to this song and to this intro, and the drop was the punch. And that song is eventually what inspired my first proper film that I ever made. By proper film, I mean a film that wasn't just me on my own with my camera. I actually
Yeah.
got actors and made it. So that song for me was the song that inspired me to make my first film. Is a boxing film, very similar to the Rockies. The storyline is very similar to the Rockies, but it was just
Fantastic.
a way of me experimenting. Yeah.
And and Deeper Underground was from a film score as well, wasn't it? It's from the Godzilla soundtrack.
Yeah, I think so. It's
It
very,
was.
very cinematic.
And you say cinematic, and so I live in a tiny little town in Essex.
Mm.
And growing up, we had a very, very old cinema, like a big theatre with these big kind of spiral staircases. It's beautiful. It's still there now. It's listed and it's derelict. It's this huge cinema. The video to Deeper Underground is made in my hometown. And I don't know if you
No
remember the
way.
video, but JK's dancing on the top of all of these seats in a cinema, and there's water everywhere, like flying up waves and such. It's a crazy, crazy video. But it's actually filmed in my tiny little hometown. So when they come across it, I've got to thumb that story in. Um, but
That's amazing.
what I want to ask you in regards to intro, Adam, is
Mm.
that when I speak to musicians, or if I speak to comedians, I always ask, like, what's your walkout music for, for your comedy? And do you always start with, your best joke to pull them in? And the same with musicians. It's like, how much time do you spend working on the intro? Because in a world of Spotify, it's saturated,
Mm.
and we're seeing more and more commercial acts like and pop bands kind of really sort of fine tuning the science of a pop song to these fast moving thumbs that younger generations seem to be getting, and short retention spans. Um, it feels like unless you hook them right at the beginning, in them first 5 seconds, they've gone on to the next thing. So with that in mind, I want to kind of throw that at you and go, when you're filmmaking, and I want to stress that for those that haven't seen what Adam and Tanya do, they're legit beautiful travel documentaries. They're very, very high end and professional, and we'll get into your journey in filmmaking. But the platform that you choose, which is YouTube, is very fast paced, and there's lots of, I don't really understand the algorithms and how these things work, but I also know that people are quick to jump from kind of like video to video because you're constantly exposed to, you might like this running down the side of the screen, and all of these distractions like a musician will find on Spotify and such. But with that in mind, when you make your travel docs, do you think, I want to do something in the first 5 seconds that's going to pull them in? Is that a consideration?
Yes, it is. But I think beyond just, because you're right, what you're saying, like YouTube, like everyone's attention span. I'm actually reading a book at the moment called Stolen Focus, and it talks all about everybody's attention span just shrinking down, and how you can't focus deeply on anything long, and you just get distracted by short little sound bites. Like you know, you think about Instagram, and Facebook, it's all just like quick little hits of things that you're scrolling through infinitely. And YouTube can very easily become that from a filmmaking point of view. Like people watching films and then they'll just skim through the bit that they want, and then they'll go on to another film, and they'll just like, you know, you add chapters into your films on YouTube now, so people can literally go, oh, I'm not interested in this, I'll skip forward to this bit. And obviously, as a filmmaker, you want to make something that someone's going to want to watch from the beginning to end, and it's got, you know, it's got a narrative arc, it's got a journey. But I think in terms of like the intro and considering an intro, yeah, it definitely is a big consideration. I think it always has been. I remember learning in media studies before YouTube was even a thing that, you know, the first shot and the first bit of music, the first dialogue, the first audio, whatever it's going to be in your film, is the most important, because it does hook an audience in and it gives them something to expect. It's like the first line of a first chapter of a book. It's got to like try and draw you in. And I think that that's been the case always. Like, I think the beginning of something is always really important. They say the beginning and the end, isn't it, the most important, and you've got to hope that people get through the middle. But yeah, you're right. At some point, nowadays it's maybe more important than others. You've got to play the game and pull people in, but you also don't want that to completely dictate your filmmaking process. You don't want to be just chasing what the algorithm thinks. Like, I don't know if you've heard of Mr. Beast. He's one of the biggest YouTubers in the world. He's got over 100 million subscribers, well over, I think, and he gets more views every week than the Super Bowl. Like, it's insane numbers. And he talks all about the hook, and he is Mr. YouTube algorithm. You know, he has nailed it. He's been obsessed with it since he was like 14. He's only 25 now. Billionaire, like really interesting, fascinating person, but he is all about the intro. It's like you pull people in, you make a promise on what you're going to deliver and what you're going to show them, and then you have to deliver on that promise. And it's just fast paced, and it's too much for me. It's so like Americanized. And with our films, this is why we don't post every week, is we want to take pride in what we make, and we don't want to just rush through and grab people's attention and make it like an assault on the senses, which is quite often what YouTube can be. But yeah, I don't know if that's answered your question.
No, absolutely, and I think, you know, you're saying it's a bit about balance, really, not compromising the art, but obviously you want to reach an audience as vastly as possible. But I guess it's just getting that compromise right, isn't it? If you start writing songs just to hook people in, then you're never really going to be able to experiment with what you do and try and develop as an artist, because it's just about chasing the hit rate. So it's the first time I've ever kind of sort of asked somebody that operates, you know, through YouTube, and as somebody whose work is so high end, and I was just interested as to what the angle was on that. So yeah, no, you answered it perfectly.
Our favorite intros always seem to be the ones where we try something different, and quite often it's easy to hit the formulaic, right, we've got to introduce who we are, introduce that we're in a van, show loads of shots of what we've done, and then move on. And that's nice, and it's like punchy and quick. But it's always like our favorite intro is our first Scotland film, and it's slower and it shows the landscape, and it kind of like organically leads you into the fact that we've lived in a van and the van's becoming our home. So I think, trying something new and not just doing the punchy, which we can fall into a rhythm of doing, it always ends up being our favorite. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about the first song you remember having an emotional impact on you.
I think a lot of people are going to laugh at me for this one, because it could be considered quite tacky. It is Three Lions, aka Football's Coming Home, by Baddiel and Skinner, and what are they called? The Lightning Seeds. I don't know those guys. I just know the Baddiel and Skinner. And that is because football has just been a really important part of my life, especially my childhood. And that song, I just remember it every time a World Cup or a Euros would be on, just it really getting in the mood. And yeah, it's probably not like all the musicians listening will probably be rolling their eyes at me, but it's just a song that really does get me feeling.
It's a fantastic pop song. I went to see the Lightning Seeds just before Christmas, and obviously it was the World Cup, and it got reissued, and they played it live, and it's really weird. It's the first time I heard that song, and like you, I've heard that song so many times, and it's so evocative, and it fires you up because it's a call to arms, and it's such associated with, for me, '96, and and just lots of nostalgia, and I was listening to it, and the opening chords, I was like, I'd never realised that Three Lions, just them opening chords, is God Only Knows by the Beach Boys. And I was like, oh my God, it's the same song. And I've never, ever noticed it until I heard it played live. And it was only when I heard the dang, 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 I was like, oh my God, yeah, it's God Only Knows. But wonderful song. So you said it reminds you of growing up. Where was growing up?
So growing up was down in Devon. I was very spoiled. I lived in the southwest in a small town just outside of Dartmouth. I don't know if you've heard of Dartmouth.
I have.
Yeah, lovely spot. And yeah, kind of, it's one of those places. We went back recently, actually, in the van, and I was seeing it more from a travel filmmaking perspective. And it's so funny how I appreciate it in such a different level now. Like growing up, you don't care really how beautiful it is. You just want to play with your mates. And, I did enjoy running around on the beaches, and we slept out on the beaches. So in a sense, you could say that we made the most of it, but it's still, till you go away and come back, you don't appreciate how beautiful a place it is, or you don't appreciate the good things about where you grow up if you're lucky enough to grow up somewhere as amazing as that. So I go back and I'm like, wow, this is the place that I want to go back to. And I never thought that. I always thought, I don't understand why everyone goes back home. They move away and they go off and have their life, and they come and settle down where they grew up. And I was like, oh, that's not going to be me. And I think it is going to be me.
Do you think that's just growing up, though? Do you think that's just getting older, that you start to see the beauty in places more? Because as a kid, I didn't grow up anywhere near as beautiful as Devon, but you just take for granted what's there. It's just there, isn't it? And it's not a focus of your attentions, I don't think. It is just day-to-day living, isn't it? And what's on TV, where we're going with my mates. And I think it's only, for me, it's only as I've got older that I've started to really appreciate things that are pretty, and not just be kind of caught up in everything else. And I guess what you do is testament to that. But do you think it's an age thing as well?
I think definitely, yeah, because I think about even just how I travel now. When I was younger, in 2013, me and my mate hopped in a Vauxhall Corsa and just drove around Europe with no real plan whatsoever. And we spent 6 weeks driving around Europe, and it was the least cultural experience of my life. Honestly, it was just going out, drinking. Where's the nearest party? Great, let's drive on. Drive to Croatia. Let's jump in the sea. And it was just stupid. It was totally different to the way of traveling that I do now, which is all about going to the place and experiencing the place and trying to meet the people and understand the culture and the history of a place. So I think, you just experience the world in a completely different place, in a completely different way as you grow up. And I think that's the same for traveling and for home. There's a line in that I wrote into the film, the Devon film that we did when we went back to Devon, that says, oh God, I've got to remember it now. Something along the lines of really appreciating where I grew up, because I was looking at where I grew up through grown-up eyes and just how different it is. And that kind of summarizes it for me, because I'm about to turn 36, so I consider myself, technically that's middle-aged. Did you know that?
Well, I'm 50 in 2 months. That's middle-aged.
That's middle-aged too.
You ain't getting no sympathy for being that, mate. 50. Harrowing.
Harrowing.
Right, okay. Look, we're going to keep it in the formative years. And for track 3, Adam, I'm going to ask you to tell me the song that reminds you of your time at school, please.
Okay, that is Angels by Robbie Williams. And I'm sure a lot of people listening will like that song. I do not like that song. I have not picked it because I like that song. I've picked it because of memory. I'm not a fan. It's kind of like in the same way that, some people will hear Crazy Frog, and that will remind them of a certain time of their life. It's not because they like Crazy Frog, it's just because it's ingrained in their mind.
Yeah.
And that's what I have with Angels. I actually like the rest of that album. As
Yeah.
you said, I do like Robbie Williams. I do like the rest of the album, but that song I'm not a fan of, and it's probably because of the context. So I lived on a farm for a while, between the ages of about 12 and 14, maybe 11 and 14. It was my mate's farm, and he had loads of siblings, and I was an only child. And we would, every morning before school, we would go over to his parents, which is literally like a 2-minute walk from where I was living. I was living in a mobile home, kind of caravan thing on their land. And we'd all of us, him and his, like, how many did he have? 3 brothers and 2 sisters. So it was 4, 5, 6, and me. We'd all bundle into this minibus, and his parents would drive us 2 minutes up the road or 5 minutes up the road to the pub, where we'd sit in this minibus and wait for the school bus to arrive. And there was about 3 or 4 songs that they would just constantly play in that minibus for like 3 years. And one of them was Angels. And I just remember every morning before school hearing Angels by Robbie Williams. And also, so because I was hanging out with him and his brothers, there's this thing that's in the countryside called the Young Farmers Club. And it's just a way, you've probably heard of it. It's a way of
I DJ'd at a Young Farmers Club.
Have you?
Event, and it was the most surreal experience of my life. I have DJ'd all over the country, and it was me, and I used to manage the lad that plays Jane, the In-Betweeners, and we went and DJ'd. They booked him to come and DJ at this event. And normally at these kind of DJ things where he's at, this was at the time, at the height of the In-Betweeners, like everybody's like, it's Jay from the In-Betweeners, and the Farmers, I didn't give a shit. They have got their own agenda, and it was one of the most surreal things I've ever experienced that night.
Yeah, they are mad parties. They're so strange, and quite a lot of the time, like, the parents are there as well. And it's like a very mixed group. And I remember loads of them having on the back of their t-shirts, like, I don't know what was going on, but there was loads of them with t-shirts that said "Eat, Sleep, Farm, Repeat." It's just like,
I love that.
It's just classic. Yeah. So I was in that world for a little while, the farmer world, and I remember one of the last songs being played, like the slow dance song, was "Angels" by Robbie Williams, and I got stuck dancing with my mate's mum, slow dancing with my mate's mum to "Angels" by Robbie Williams, and I never realized how long that song was. What is it, like 4 or 5 minutes? It felt like an eternity. So that's like awkward young teenager dancing with his mate's mum to Angels. And yeah, that's what Angels Robbie Williams means to me. The awkward young teenager, kind of like summed up.
You're going to be on a chaise lounge talking to a psychiatrist at some point in your life. It's all going to go back to that moment, mate. I'm telling you.
Yeah, that's it. I'll have to like re-listen to the song to develop a new relationship to it. Therefore, to my inner self.
Oh, wonderful! So, did you enjoy school?
I did enjoy school, actually. I was not very academic, and I only really found what I was good at, which when I got to do media studies at A level, and like I got handed a camera and was like, oh, what's this? And started playing with it. And that just naturally became my passion. It was the first time I was getting good grades and the teachers liked me. Before that, I wasn't a troublemaker, but I'd get bored. I wasn't particularly interested in learning the stuff that I was being taught. I was only enjoyed and looking forward to going to school so I could play football with my mates at break. Like, it's funny because I'm not a musical person at all, but when I was a kid, I played the violin, the drums, the guitar. I think that's it. And a bit of the piano. That's what I learned, but I gave them all up to be able to play football in my break because it was taking away from me just kicking around with my mates. So I a bit of regret from that, but I know that if I was put in that position again, I'd do the exact same thing because football was like what I absolutely loved as a kid growing up. And yeah, I wasn't by any means part of the cool kids, but because I was good at football, I never got bullied. I never had any trouble at school from that sense. I always had a good core set of friends, and I wasn't a very controversial character, so I was quite chilled. Like, one of my best mates, he'd get not bullied but picked on a bit because he was with me, and he was trying to be part of the cool kids, and it just didn't work, and he was just trying too hard to be a part of a different group, and he got picked on for that. But
Yeah.
I enjoyed school.
Wonderful, wonderful. So the minute you said that you found, actually, I want to touch on something when you said about the instruments that you were sort of learning to play on that. And I know if you're listening to the podcast that I know it was quite late in her life, but your mum learned to play the saxophone.
Yes.
And so was home quite a musical place?
A little bit, yeah. Mum was one of those people that couldn't have music on in the background. She'd only put it on if she was literally sitting down to listen to it. Otherwise, she'd just find it a distraction. So it's not like it was on all the time, like when we were eating or doing anything else. But every now and then, she'd just be sat there listening to her music. Lots of kind of the Lighthouse family she loved. She always quite liked jazz. Yeah, I remember. What's that? I can't remember who did it. Respect.
Aretha Franklin.
That song.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's got
yeah,
a killer saxophone solo in it. That must have been inspiration.
Yeah. That was it. But it's really interesting because when Mum did take up the saxophone, I was kind of surprised that it suddenly became this passion of hers, because even though I knew she enjoyed listening to music, and she would get, because she didn't listen to it in the background, I just didn't think it was that much of a part of her life. But now reflecting, I remember her just sat there just listening to music, like I said. So I think it must have been something that was closer to her heart, maybe more so than I realized. And then I after she passed, because she passed away in 2019, at the very beginning of 2019, and I had to go through all of her stuff, and I found her not big but quite hefty kind of stack of vinyl, and there's some great tracks there. Like, she had all the Bob Marley stuff, she had the Beatles, so she had a great taste in music. But it was something that she listened to quite privately, and she couldn't like have any music on whilst driving. She'd just find it distracting.
So, and let's just give that a little bit more sort of context insofar as the life that you've gone on to lead, and essentially Jits, which is short for Jitters, which is the camper that you and Tanya live in, and that was your mum's, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So Mum brought this van, and she called it Jitters because the license plate's JTS, and when you drive it around, it jitters around. If you drive it at over 60 miles an hour, it's jittering around like crazy. So Jitters, and then, like you say, short for Jitters is Jits. And yeah, she went off and did 2 big trips on her own with her colleagues. She did 6 months around Wales and kind of central England, and then she did 6 months around Scotland. And before that, so this would be in 2016 kind of time. 2015 was the first summer she went away in the van, and then 2016 was the second summer. And this was the first time I was introduced to van life. It hadn't been really something that had crossed my mind. So it was really interesting to see her go off on her own with the 2 dogs, and it was something that she really wanted to do. And it was quite an inspiration, actually, seeing her go off and do that, because it's just so brave of her to do that. Like, she really embraced retirement. She didn't just sit around kind of like twiddling her thumbs. She went for it. Like I said, she learned the saxophone. She took that on and got to a really high level. Actually, not high as in, world class high, but she was playing gigs, and she was gigging at weddings and stuff. So she was in a band. So to see her do that, it was inspirational in the fact that she wasn't afraid to take on new challenges. In your 60s, it's not too late to learn new things. Something she'd never done anything musical before, learn the saxophone, and it's not too late to go out and have these adventures, like in a camper van, even if it is just you on your own with your dogs in a tiny little van. And then when she passed away in 2019, before that, she'd given me, like, she taught me how to drive the van, because I'd never driven a van before. So she sent me off in the van and like let me borrow it, because I was really interested to see what van life was like after seeing Mum do it. And yeah, when she passed away, it was just a really nice kind of like legacy that she left, was the van, and like what the van means, which is this kind of liberation, this freedom, and the idea that, adventures out there, like kind of whoever you are and however old you are. And I was really fortunate because obviously it's an old van, it's a rusty van, but it's got everything you need in it. And she'd done all the research for me. Like, it's a van that you can stand up in, it's got a toilet, it's got a bathroom. And I remember speaking to her about van life and thinking, oh, maybe I'll get my own van. And I was looking at these fancy VWs because I was like, I want something cool. And I literally wanted like a bright orange VW. And mum was like, you're an idiot. That's a weekend van. You can't live in that. And also look how much more expensive it is. You're paying for the badge.
Yeah.
And eventually, after looking around, I realized she's right. And the Jitters, absolutely perfect van. So yeah, super fortunate to have inherited that van from mum and inherited what, you know, the spirit of what that van means and what that van meant to her, and be able to take that and live it full time. I remember my first trip in Jitters was to Dartmoor, just right near where I live, just the moors. And I remember after that first night, I was like, right, I want to spend as much time as I possibly can in this van, camping out and doing van life. And now I can say I've done 3.5 years of full-time van life, and there's definitely a lot more to come in the future after we've done our backpacking, more tropically stuff, which unfortunately we can't get the van to.
Wonderful and totally inspiring. At 4 o'clock tonight, I'm going to look at a van. And,
no way, really?
Yeah, and then that's it. It'll be I think I'm going to go for it.
Nice.
This one. So and then
because when we spoke before, you were saying that you're going to take the leap into van life.
Yeah.
Do you have any trips planned?
Ireland, definitely Ireland. Again, inspired by what I see of your trip. It just looked incredible. And but yeah, we'll chat about that later. I want to get back to your story. Okay, tell me the first song you remember buying from a record shop.
Okay, so again, I've got two answers to this. The answer I tell everyone, and then the truth. The answer I tell everyone is Limp Bizkit, because that was my second.
Yeah.
And it just sounds a lot cooler than the answer to my first, which is the Spice Girls album. And that was Spice World. No, not Spice World. What's it called? Just Spice Album, I think.
Yeah.
Their first album. Yeah, I don't really know why. I think I just heard the music. This would have been back in primary school. I think I just heard the music and liked it and brought it. That was it. Nothing more. Nothing more to it.
But I think like it's very hard to kind of be cool with this question, and I've been really lucky that of all the guests that have been on, nobody's ever tried to kind of make out that their first record was something super credible, because you've got young ears and you're going to get drawn to the most kind of bubblegum pop that just sounds as sweet as it can sound. And I think that's just, and I'm always happy that people are brutally honest and sometimes, embarrassed by some of their early choices. But I don't subscribe to guilty pleasures. Pleasures are pleasures. And whatever.
Pleasure, yeah. I like that.
Absolutely. I want to sort of pick back up on when you said you done media studies at school, and you got given a camera when you was doing your A-levels for the first time. Because to learn how to do stuff like that takes time and takes focus. And you said you wasn't necessarily massively academic, and you was far more interested in sort of sport and stuff like that. Like when you got that camera and you started to kind of put the time in to understand it, to start making films, did that ever feel like, for a lad in a little town in Devon, that this could be a career opportunity?
Yeah, because everybody around me suddenly started taking me seriously in a way, because they could see that I was good at that, and everybody was saying to me, great, this could, like my teachers would joke and say, like, if you don't go and do this professionally, I'm going to kill you, kind of thing. Like, you should. And it was the first time that anyone had really had that belief in me. So yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Like, I did struggle at school before academically. Like, I was dyslexic, so everything was really difficult. I was, I still think maybe at the time dyslexia wasn't necessarily understood. I remember going to a special dyslexic thing in my break time, so again taking away from football, and it just feeling like a waste of time. Like, they were trying to make me write my D and my B the right way so that I wasn't doing them backwards, because like I'd write in mirror image sometimes. And the teacher asked me, oh, how are you feeling about this? Because I was, I think, making quite a clear statement by my actions that I was bored. And she asked me how I said, and I just said straight, oh, I'm just bored. And she refused to teach me from that moment on. And it was great because it wasn't helping me. It was taking away from my leisure time. And yeah, I just think that the way dyslexia was dealt with wasn't really helpful. And I got extra time in exams. Maybe that was helpful, but it wasn't addressing the problem. It was just giving me more time. And I think something that's quite often missed is you don't, in education, in the education system, like you don't find what lights the kid up. And until I picked up a camera, I hadn't found what lit me up. So I was just going through the motions at school, and playing football because that lit me up. And I think I was, being dyslexic, I was always quite a visual person. So even when I was a child and I was playing with my action figures, I'd be visualizing them in all sorts of scenes, and kind of without realizing, I would be making up films and making up stories about these kids. And like I'd be having these different angles of what was going on. So almost these different camera angles of what was going on. It was bizarre thinking back on it. Like I was doing that without realizing.
Yeah.
So then to bring it back to when I first picked up a camera and people around me, yeah, I was suddenly doing something that other people, adults were like taking notice of. And I don't, I look back on my stuff now, I don't think it was anything particularly special. I just think that it was good. And I was, and everyone could see I was enjoying it. And I had a little bit of a natural flair for that kind of thing. And yeah, mum was always very, very supportive of me, whatever I wanted to do. But she never really expected me to go to university. She didn't, because I wasn't doing well academically, and she was fine with that. But my path was it was a very narrow path, basically, the one I was walking until I picked up a camera. I was literally probably just going to work, at the time of doing my A-levels, I was working part-time at a bar. I had no idea what was going to be next for me. I just knew that I enjoyed making films, and then eventually got into university, continued to enjoy it. I actually changed from film studies to broadcasting because film studies was too theoretical, and I saw all the people on broadcasting playing around with cameras, which is what I wanted to do. So I switched to that.
And then, where was that? Yeah, where did you go to uni?
Falmouth, yeah, down in Falmouth. And it was amazing. Loved Falmouth. And again, uni for me, I think I said this to you when we spoke before, uni for me was just a great way of me learning how to play with cameras and learning, like teaching myself, basically. I don't think I learned anything specifically from the people around me, but I just had the time and the excuse to just play around with cameras. And then I was very lucky to come out of university with a job, like a job for this tiny little production company filming sailing. And that was what got me started. And I was, so lucky.
One of the other things that I imagine happened when you got to, we'll pick back up on that. One of the other things that I imagine happened when you got to Falmouth as a student was clubbing, right? I mean,
a little bit. It's not a very big clubbing scene, but yes.
But when was clubbing? So I know you did also move a little later to London. Was that where the kind of clubbing started?
Clubbing started actually when I was still doing my A-levels, because something happened. I can't remember exactly why, but I was doing my A-levels a year later. I think it was because when I went to do A-levels at school, it was the first year that my school was doing A-levels, and I think they had a bit of a reset after the first year, so I had to start my courses again. So I did 3 years of A-levels rather than 2. So I was actually 18 when I was doing my post-16, when I was doing my A-levels.
Oh, okay.
So it started when I was still in Dartmouth, and we'd go over to Torquay for our clubbing. That was where my clubbing scene started. Torquay, British Riviera.
Good memories.
Good memories. Yeah, there was this club called Route 66, which is shut down now. And I remember going there. You'd never get anything like this now, I'm sure, not in the UK anyway. £12 entry, all you could drink all night. No questions asked. There was it is mad. And there was no kind of like bracelet. There was no cup. It was just whatever. You're in, of course, drinks are free. Dangerous, but so much fun.
I think I think the government. I mean, I run a nightclub. That's what I do, and I think the local licensing commission. I don't think they'd be down for that kind of stuff anymore. I think it's sort of
No,
frowned
that's
upon,
a
isn't
thing of the
it?
past.
Yeah, 12 quid coming. Yeah, fill your boots. It's like
Yeah.
I don't think that happens anymore. It's such
It
a
was
shame.
dangerous. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, tell me a little about the songs, because I think you was greedy on this one as well. The songs
No,
that
no.
sound. No, was it just the one on this one?
No, I picked one on this one. I knew this one was immediate. I knew exactly what this one was. This was the easiest choice for me.
Wonderful. What are we going for?
So it's Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses. And it's not, it's not the kind of song that most people think of when they think of clubbing. It's not a traditional clubbing track. But at the end of the night, every night on a Friday or a Saturday, whichever night I went, both, it was the song that they'd play at the very end of the night. And I just have so many memories there, being like 18, being fairly intoxicated, should we say, and just high on life. And I remember the lyrics, like there's parts of the song, and I read into them thinking they're quite reminiscent. A lot of the lyrics, and the song itself is quite reminiscent, and it's about looking back, and it's like Sweet Child of Mine. And I remember quite often having moments of being really present, appreciating being young, loving the fact that I'm making the most of my youth, of what I thought was making the most of my youth, being battered in a club, and just knowing that my whole life was like ahead of me. And I remember thinking how sad it would be being future me, looking back at this and knowing it was the past. And that is me when I was 18, and I'm turning 36 this month. So it's 18 years later. So I've lived that amount of time again, looking back at me, thinking that. It's mind blowing. The blink of an eye, I've lived another 18 years since then. And yeah, it's crazy, but I don't look back at it sadly. I look back at it really, really fondly. And
That's
yeah,
quite
it's just
a
a
heavy thought to have as an 18-year-old. I
drunk
mean, I don't
18
know
year
if
old as well.
anything that's to do with it, the 12 quid and think what you want, but like that's quite a, the fact that you can recall thinking that as well, that's quite a heavy and impactful thought to have at that sort of formative age.
Yeah, I was always thinking about time. That was something that I always was fascinated. It always made me emotional, like the passing of time, that thing that you can't control. Like having a birthday every year, even when I was a kid, like even when I was like 15, 16, you know, I hated it. I hated getting older. I've come to terms with it now. Now I genuinely am getting older. But it's a weird one because you're simultaneously the oldest you've ever been and the youngest you will ever be at any one time in your life, right? And I think about that a
Fucking hell,
lot. And
I've
that is
never thought that. That's fucking
yeah,
surreal.
yeah. And you're not. I don't think we've evolved to deal with that, have we? Because that's such an odd thing. And
You can't
time.
just drop that on someone that's just about to turn 50, Adam. Fucking hell.
I know, and it's very easy for me to go very dark when I think about time, but I don't mean it when I say it. Even though it feels dark, it sounds dark. I don't mean it like that. It's just a way of, I think it's a way of me reflecting on it. I don't know. Okay, I'll quickly go off topic a little bit, but there's this book I read called Buddhism Without Beliefs, and it speaks about how you should meditate on death. And again, they say that sounds depressing until you understand why. And the reason you should meditate on death, it's kind of like the analogy this author uses, if you hurt your thumb, let's just say you've got your thumb in a cast because you've broken your thumb. The day that your thumb comes out of your cast, you can be like, oh my God, I'm so glad I've got my thumb back because that was really annoying to not have my thumb. But very quickly, that feeling of appreciating your thumb will just disappear and you'll just take it for granted. So if you don't think, oh my God, I'm so lucky to have this thumb, then you'll just take it for granted. Same with life. If you spend as much time as you can thinking about the fact that you're going to die, then you will appreciate the fact that you are alive now. And my favorite quote from a film is, now is the envy of all of the dead. And I think that just sums it up entirely. So every birthday, I get upset about the fact that a year has gone that I'll never get back. And people can tell me, oh, but it's only a number. And I'm like, yeah, but it's a number closer to the number I'm going to die at, like,
yeah.
And I can't get past that. But the way I deal with that is by thinking, yeah, you're right, I'm not going to be here forever, and I am getting close to death, so I better live and make the most of it. And that's a lot of the driving motivation for what I do and the decisions I make through life, and that ensures that I am traveling full time. I am doing the best that I can do in my life. Trying to. And I guess there's two ways you can go. You can let it stress you out about not making the most of your time, or you can let it motivate you to just enjoy the journey. And that's how I try and approach it.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I went off on one there a bit.
No, not at all. Not at all. That's the beauty of podcasting. There's always space to do that. And I think, your desire for adventure and experience, again, just to shout it out there, go on YouTube, people, if you've not done so already, and search for Jits into the Sunset, because it's inspirational. It's like I say, it's made me put myself in a position where I'm buying a camper and I'm going to go and experience different places and just enjoy Max the time that you're here, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for that shout. It means a lot.
Okay. Well, let's take you home. And for track 6, I want a favourite song from an artist from your home county, please.
Now I've been greedy. Home county. Oh, I read it as country.
Adam,
okay.
Don't worry. I've
dyslexic. See,
mate. It's not just that. It's like I've done over 400 of these, and I reckon 380 people have just always go, "Oh shit, county! I thought it was country." So why I never put that in big block capitals when I send the questions over, I'll never know. But it's fine.
Okay, I can do it. I know I can do it. I've got lots of options actually, because I'm from Devon. Ben Howard. I love Ben Howard. He's from Devon. But I'm going to go for a lesser known one. There's an artist called Cosmo Jarvis. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Of course.
You have? Well, there you go. Great. Cosmo Jarvis. So there's a track called Love This by Cosmo Jarvis. And I love that track. And I appreciate him so much as an artist, because he's been quite inspirational to me in a lot of ways, because you can just see his journey and how he just is so prolific in putting stuff out there. He's taught himself to play all the instruments. He's had no formal training. He struggled at school just like me, and he's just not afraid of what people think. He will just put content out and music out and his films out, and he's a filmmaker, of course, as well as a musician. And I've just found him a great inspiration. And he's always been like a few years younger than me, and obviously always he's a few years younger than me, and it's always made me go, yes, I've got to step up my game. I've got to keep making and keep creating. And I, in a healthy way, I think, I've used to compare myself to him. We've taken completely different journeys now, but I used to compare myself to him in the sense of like, am I creating? Am I making things? And looking at him and seeing he is just following his passion and just making whatever. Like there's a YouTube film of him, literally, it's called something like, this was back when he was like 16, 17, 10 things you can do with a bin. And it's just him like jumping around with a bin. And I was just like, he's just making stuff for the fun of it. And I found that really inspirational. So there you go. That's probably a better answer than the one from my country, actually.
Cosmo Jarvis is a lovely surprise. A perfect addition to the playlist.
Nice.
Tell me about the sort of pressure you put on yourself to create, because you said that, you was just watching what he was doing and feeling inspired by that, and like, how much pressure do you put on yourself? Because there must have to be a balance when you're traveling between the part of your travels which is, I want to experience adventure and experience, and then, I mean, obviously by filming it, you're documenting it as well, which is, the most perfect photo album you're ever going to have. But like, not just the travel docs when you're out in Jits, but just in general, like as somebody who's clearly found a creative spark when they were at sixth form, like, because I don't know, like the creative things that I do, I always, if I just sit there and I think, oh, do you know what, I'm just gonna watch a bit of telly for an hour, like half hour in, I'm like, oh, do you know what, like let me just go and write that bit down. And it's like, and I kind of feel like I'm sort of cheating on creativity if I sit still for too long and don't do something. That sounds ridiculous, but do you put pressure on yourself to keep sort of creating things and putting stuff together?
Sometimes I think it's got worse, and I have to really keep a handle on it now, like we were talking about YouTube earlier, and how it's quick paced, everyone's making stuff. Like most YouTube content creators will make a film every week, if not more often than that. That's the standard thing. And like really and truly, to be the most successful you can be on YouTube, you should be making something every week. And I've always fought against that since day one, since we started traveling and making films. I never wanted to do that because I knew A, I wouldn't enjoy it, and B, I wouldn't be making the best films I could be. I'd be just churning stuff out. So I really have to like not compare myself to other people who've taken a completely different approach really to the filmmaking and to YouTube, and but who are like, you know, they'll be surpassing us in their numbers. Like every kind of like few weeks we'll see another creator go, oh yeah, look at them getting more views and more stuff than us, because they're playing the algorithm. And
Yeah.
it's a really tough one because I have to remind myself that it's not about the numbers. Obviously the numbers are important in terms of the making a living, like they have to be. You can't get away from that, but that's not the sole reason I'm making the films and that we're making the films. So we have to just be kinder to yourself, I think, and remind yourself that as long as you're enjoying the process, then that's the most important thing. Otherwise it's not sustainable, and then you won't make anything. Like if you are just cranking out things because you think you should, you'll burn out and then you won't enjoy it, and then you'll stop, full stop. So it's kind of like a slow and steady wins the race situation, I think, or whatever your pace is. Like some people definitely thrive on making videos every week, but it's not for me. And yeah, I think other than YouTube, yeah, I can be hard on myself. Like I met up with a friend of mine the other day who I lived in London with, because I haven't really spoken about that, but I lived in London after university for 10 years. And we had a small film collective. There's me and two others. And I met up with both of them actually the other day shooting a music video, just a passion project for fun. And we were talking about the years we had in London, and they were at peace with it, but I was still have a bit of regret for not doing more there, not doing more in our 20s when we had the time, we had the freedom. You know, there was nothing really, well, time was maybe the thing, but there was nothing really holding us back from making more and experimenting more with our filmmaking. And I definitely had a moment where my confidence got knocked because I made something that wasn't as good as I wanted it to be, and I let that put me off making my own films for a while. And yeah,
Do you make
again, I'm not
reference
really.
to that look to yourself when you're feeling that pressure of getting on the YouTube wheel and weekly content, and do you ever kind of cast your mind back to that moment and go, do you know what, that really pissed me off when I kind of didn't put out something that I felt was a good representation of myself? Do you ever kind of reference that when you find yourself doing what you do now and not maybe putting out content as frequently as other van lifers and such?
Mm.
You know what I mean with
Yeah,
that?
a little bit. Yeah, I think so. But it's funny because you can go the other way. You can go too far down that route and become a perfectionist, which is
Yeah,
not healthy. And I think also, and I definitely am guilty of this, like being a perfectionist can be a sign of insecurity. It's like, because when you make something, you put it out there, that's a reflection of your ability. It's a reflection of you. It's a reflection of your personal identity on, I consider myself a filmmaker. So therefore, here's my films. Here's my film, everybody. This is me. And I think that, and this is where it comes back to what I was thinking about with Cosmo Jarvis and what he's an inspiration is, he'll just do it and put it out there and not care, and he'll develop and he'll understand you have to make crap films before you can make good films. Whereas better now than I was, but there's definitely one of the reasons that I would take so long, or that we would take so long before posting our films, would be like, they have to be perfect. They have to be perfect. And that's not healthy, because then it will never be done. And you'll never be happy with it. And yeah, it's just, I think it's kind of like saying you're a perfectionist. I heard this on another podcast, actually, someone saying that saying you're a perfectionist is essentially saying, oh, I'm too good for this. I'm too good to have finished that thing. I'm too good to have done that quickly. And that's not what I want to be. I want to make the things the best I can, but not let that hold me back. I don't know if I'm articulating this well, but do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Like, yeah, very, very, very concise. Okay, well, look, we've spoke about so many songs, and what I want to do with this one is kind of allow you to be not a tastemaker, an influencer. You're a YouTuber, you become an influencer now. And you can be an influencer. Get down with the kids.
Down with
Tell
the
me a
kids.
song, Adam, that you think many people may not know that you would like them to hear.
God, I could have said so many for this, but I'm going to go with "Slipped Over" by Paul Vito, and he's a very small artist based in Bristol. He's actually a very good friend of mine, and I think his music is great. It's lots of it is about anxiety, about his journey with anxiety, and yeah, he was the filmmaker who I was with in London as well. So he's a filmmaker. He's had a theatre collective, a film collective with me, and he's a musician. He's been in a band, and now he's doing his own solo stuff, and it's just great. I think great music is really interesting, and it's quite unique and modern, and it's a good example of me showing, look, I can choose a cool song because all my other songs have been a bit questionable. But look, I'm cool. I'm down with the kids. Here's some alternative indie music.
Exactly, mate. Exactly. Well, we make it really easy, Adam, for people to go and listen to that track, as well as all of the other songs that you've picked today, because we put together a little Spotify playlist that accompanies this
Great.
podcast. And I mean, I've had an absolute joy talking to you today, and this is the first
That's
time
been great.
that I'm going to have a couple on, and to have you, and then and to have Tanya coming up in a moment. It's going to be really interesting because I'm so used to seeing you both together and you know, doing what you do. It's going to be really interesting, you know, to sort of. It's been lovely to speak to you, and it's, you know, equally it's going to be lovely to sort of get Tanya's perspective on the journey and such. So, what I will say as well, because I'm going to hammer this point home, that I've mentioned the YouTube channel, but tell us a little bit more about if people want to follow you and keep up to speed with you and what you're going to be doing. Like, give us a big sales pitch, mate. Go for it.
Okay, big sales pitch. I'll keep it sharp. So yeah, to find anything we do, if you go to jitsintothesunset.com, that will have links to our YouTube channel and our podcast. And yeah, as I said, we've lived full time in our camper van for 3.5 years, making travel films. The podcast is interviews with people who have lived alternative lives outside of the traditional 9 to 5, the traditional kind of trajectory that most people, you know, can easily go down unless they make purposeful decisions to go against the grain. So we speak to them about why they've done it, get to know them, and yeah, we really enjoy it. It's an absolute passion project. I mean, you know, podcasting is so much fun to do, and you get to have really good chats with people that, you know, you otherwise wouldn't necessarily get to chat with, at least not in the same way, and it forces these great conversations. So we've loved that podcast. That's an absolute passion project of ours, and we're going to really endeavor to keep that going. And next for us, we want to go somewhere a bit further afield. Not quite, Jits wouldn't get there. So we are going off. We're going east. We're starting off in Indonesia, and we're hoping to go to places like, again, this is all very preliminary, but we want to go like Japan, Nepal, and we want to do like lots of hiking, outdoor, adventure films, and just get to know places that are further afield from Europe and film something that will really inspire me from a visual point of view, because I love Europe and it's been amazing being here for the last 3 years. But I think I want something a bit more exotic to get those, get those juices flowing again. And yeah, we're really excited. Hopefully going to be having about a year of that. And then maybe building a homestead, maybe building out another van. Who knows? The book's kind of open and ongoing. But yeah, very exciting times ahead.
Oh, it's been a pleasure watching your journey so far, and I can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah.
Adam, thank you so much, mate. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, Tanya and I were speaking. We were looking at the list of guests you have, and we were getting imposter syndrome because we were like, "Wow, like these massive names. No one's going to know who we are. What are we doing here?" So yeah, it's an absolute honor to be on the podcast, and thank you so much for giving us this platform, this amazing platform.
Absolute pleasure, mate. I'm going to press stop. Don't go anywhere.
Cool. I'll press stop my end too.